Welcome to another episode of Sips and Screams. We're twin sister horror movie fanatics, sip themed cocktails, and discuss our favorites in the genre. Today we are discussing what I would call a cult classic, Session 9 from 2001. This was written by Brad Anderson and Stephen Gaviden and directed by Brad Anderson. And it's got some familiar faces in there. I'm looking at you, Josh Lucas, David Caruso. And we've been wanting to do this one since we had the idea of starting a podcast on horror movies. So we're really, really excited to dive into the haunts, horrors, and personalities of Danvers Asylum with you all. I'm Ashley, and joining me, as always, is my twin sister, Allie. Allie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, I've been so excited to do this one. And, you know, our listeners on social media are also excited about this one. So I can't wait to dig in.
I feel like this is one of your favorites. You always talk about it. You've been talking about it for a very long time. So
I have. And I bring this up, I think, to everyone who asks about horror movies. I've gotten so many friends to watch this one. So yeah, I'm just very excited.
Awesome. You were leading the cult, perhaps.
Maybe. I'm the one that made it a cult classic, perhaps, because we know that this was not popular when it came out in 2001.
It wasn't. And I think you're part of the resurgence of Session 9 on social media.
Yeah. The number of people I've told about this movie. I think I am.
Okay. So this is episode 4. We are a couple of months into the Sips and Screams podcast. So I'd like to tell you where you can find us online. First, we are everywhere where you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, you know, all of the places. You name it. You can also follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. We are now on TikTok.
Yeah, we made our way to TikTok. We're learning the platform.
We are
people have been supportive.
They have, and our handle is at Sips and Screams Pod. So DM us. Check us out. You know, we're very excited to interact with you all. You can also email us at sipsandscreams.pod@gmail.com. If you're old school and you want to Gmail, please do that. And we'd love to hear from you. Okay, so it is time for Killer Cocktails, my favorite part of the podcast, where we get to start the night, really, in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited for this one. It's Friday night. We want to get into this. I have my cocktail ready. Do you have your cocktail ready?
I do have it ready.
Yeah.
My gold shaker. I didn't shake it yet, so I'm going to do it.
Okay. Me neither. Let's shake it. And then I'm going to tell everyone what this is. All right. Okay.
It's a surprise.
It is a surprise. Tonight's cocktail, we are calling Simon's Revenge. Yes. We'll get into this when I talk about the movie. But Simon is a pretty important, let's call him character in the movie. Can we call him that, Ash?
Yeah, I think we can call him a character. He definitely is an identity.
Yeah, an identity. Okay, let's call Simon. Yeah, an identity. Mm-hmm. But we're calling this one Simon's Revenge. So go ahead and pour this. I'm excited to get into it. You know, it's been a long week. Oh, mine's almost pink.
Ooh. Oh. Well, you know, that's what happens when you mix cranberry and
All right, now this drink. Oh, yours looks really good. Yours looks a lot more red than mine. Okay, this is called Simon's Revenge.
The background.
Yeah, mine's more pink. All right, Simon's Revenge. Let's get into this. This is 1 part vodka. So you want to do maybe a shot and a half of vodka. Some cranberry juice, maybe, you know, another part cranberry. So squeeze half of a lime in there and then shake that up and top it off with your favorite sparkling. Mine, of course, is Topo Chico. We've talked about this before. It's elite. What are you putting on yours, Ash?
I also love Topo Chico. I don't know. I went to the store and they didn't have any. So mine's San Pellegrino. But look at that. Look how pretty.
That looks really good.
Excited. I mean, it's just an elevated cran vodka. You know, there's not
exactly.
There's not much special, but it's red.
It's taking us back to our early 20s, Ash.
Absolutely. The clubbing days.
Early 20s. Yeah. When you're drinking those cranberry vodkas. Join us.
You know what's so funny? When you're going out drinking cranberry vodka, it's because at first you're like, ooh, like it's a fancy drink, you know, and then you get older and it eventually gets less and less cranberry in it, where it's just a vodka soda.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're regressing.
We are. We're regressing. We're back to our early 20s.
But like some sweet drinks.
Yeah. Let's see. I haven't tasted yet. All right. Sip number 1 for tonight.
Just as good as I remember.
It's delicious. Ooh, the lime in there really adds something. So make sure you squeeze some lime in there. Ooh,
I can try this right now. Like, it's so good.
With it?
Oh, this is delicious. This is a nice summer cocktail. I might be into these this summer.
Simon's Revenge, everyone. You heard it here first. It kind of looks like, mine looks like diluted blood. But
mine tastes like a popsicle.
Yeah. Yours looks closer to that kind of red blood color than mine. It's delicious.
Okay, now that we have our cocktails, it's time for sips and synopsis. And as always, Allie, take it away. Tell us about session 9.
All right, session 9. We are going back 23 years to 2001. August 2001 is when this movie came out. And it wasn't a popular movie. You know, when it came out, it was, only playing in so many theaters. So if you got to see this, is it 30 theaters?
Yeah, 30.
If you got to see this in August 2001, I mean, it was rare that you got to see it. So again, like you said, this movie was directed by Brad Anderson, who before this was doing romantic comedies. This was actually his very first horror film.
Quite the pivot.
Yeah, quite the pivot. Yeah. So from romantic comedies to, psychological horror. So this movie really is that. And it was, written by Brad Anderson and Stephen Gaviden, who actually stars in the movie as well as Mike.
Very important role.
Yes. And potentially a cliche role, but yes, very important role. Yes. So this movie, like you said earlier, it was set at Danvers Mental Hospital.
Yep. It's real.
And so real. And it was actually filmed there as well. So this movie was filmed on location.
Crazy. It was in Massachusetts.
Yes, right? in Danvers, Massachusetts, at this condemned state asylum. And so the movie, stars our protagonist, our Gordon.
Protagonist. Well,
yeah, we're going to call him protagonist. Again, I think one thing that Brad Anderson does really well, I've seen some of his other movies as well, The Machinist is one of them. He does a pretty good job at misdirection and at some surprise endings. So I think this movie's definitely worth a second watch. So if you haven't seen it, watch it once and then rewatch it right away because you'll notice some things you didn't pick up the first time.
Just finish it and just rewatch.
Yeah, and then just get right back in there.
Have a night of session 9.
And we couldn't do that in 2001. Right? We didn't have these things streaming. You would go watch it in the theater and then you had to wait 6 months till it came out on video.
Your VCR. You could rewind the tape, the
That's
DVD.
True.
Well, what do they have that? DVDs, I think?
I'm pretty sure it was VHS back then. I'm not sure. It must have been DVD. But okay, we've got our protagonist, Gordon. Gordon owns
Gordo.
Asbestos removal company. Yes. Let's call him Gordo. I mean, come on. They talk about that in the movie. So Gordon and his colleague Phil, or his coworker Phil, so it starts out, and they really set the tone right away. They're filming it at the actual condemned Danvers, mental hospital.
Yeah.
Danvers State Asylum. And, from the get-go, it's really this unsettling feeling of this abandoned building.
Very.
And so they're there. They really want this job. They want this job of removing the asbestos. And so they managed to get the job, which is great for Gordon. He's really expressing that he needs it. His colleague Phil, let's say he's played by David Caruso. So like you said, some really famous faces in this who kind of went on to
CSI David Caruso.
CSI Miami, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So they managed to secure this job. But not without, as they're touring around the hospital, when they're trying to get this job, again, not without some creepy things happening at the very beginning. It's kind of setting the scene from the get-go. Seems like the hospital's talking to them, and specifically Gordon. So it really seems like the hospital, some entity in the hospital is already speaking to Gordo. But
I have it. Should I play it?
Yes. Let's hear it.
This is the best part.
Hello.
I just had to play it. Continue, please.
Okay, so we learn it's likely a 3-week job to remove all this asbestos from this condemned building. But Gordon and Phil said that they'll do it in 1 week. They get the job 1 week. I mean, they go from 3 to 1. It sounds, again, do I know anything about asbestos removal? Absolutely not.
I don't know.
But cutting it by a third does seem rather ambitious. But
they're going to bring in extra people.
They did, yeah. So it's not just Gordon and Phil. He's going to bring in his coworker Hank. Again, Hank's played by Josh Lucas. He's going to bring in his other coworker Mike, played by Stephen Gaviden, and he's going to bring in his nephew Jeff. that will, who's a great character in this.
He's so good.
Yeah, I like him in this. But, Gordon, they get the job, and that's really exciting for him. So we see, I think, one of the pivotal scenes at the very beginning of the movie. He gets home. We learn that Gordon has a wife named Wendy and a new baby named Emma. And so he's going home to celebrate. He's got his, I think, champagne. He has flowers.
He has peanut butter
stuffed in there. Yeah. And we see him, go into his home and celebrate. Right? They got the job.
Yeah, she did not seem that happy to see him.
She didn't. She didn't, and they,
when he was in the car
at the beginning that they have him getting a lot of sleep with the new baby and everything. So yeah, but then the whole
he kind of lingers in the truck too. A little bit.
He does linger. It seems like he's hesitant to go in. And it seems almost like she's surprised to see him. Yes. But in any case, I think Gordon had different plans for that night. But we cut to the next day. So now it starts out for the week. So I love how they did this in the movie, how every day, and they put it up on the screen, it'll be like Monday, Tuesday. It's 7 days. So you can almost predict when the end is coming, which I love that. So the next day, again, we've got our crew. We've got Gordon, we've got Phil, we've got Hank, we've got Mike, who I'd say is kind of the smart, failed lawyer one, but he's pretty smart. And then we have Jeff. And so they're just out to work. So they're in there doing their various jobs around this, this hospital, removing the asbestos. I think this movie, one of the things that's really interesting about it, that it's really good at misdirection, right? And there's almost like different plot lines happening in the movie. And you have them working in the hospital. Then you have the lunchtime where they all get together. And I think you learn a lot of things at lunch. And then you have things happening at night. And so it's really fun to kind of see those different parts of the movie play out. But one of the pivotal scenes, I think it's the first day and they're at lunch. And this is where we learn kind of the history of the Danvers, state asylum. So Mike, again, he's being a lawyer and he knows a lot about the hospital. And we first learn about, why it was condemned and why it was shut down.
He knew a lot about it.
He did know a lot about it.
Curious.
He was. And so, they say it was condemned and that it was shut down. And then he's like, do you want to know the real reason? So at the first lunch, Mike gives them a history lesson about, why it was shut down. And it's because they were using some of these, I guess, experimental or kind of risque techniques. One of them being repressed memory syndrome. And so there was this, and again, I'm curious to hear what you think about that, Ash. But there was one patient there who had told this whole story about how she was in a satanic cult, accusing her family and everything of abusing her. And it turns out none of that was real. But that was something effectively that was planted. And so that's a really important scene because it plays into later when we're listening to these sessions, hence session 9. And so again, cut to they're inside the building. Mike, the failed lawyer, works a lot with Jeff, with Gordo's nephew, the fool. He is the Joker. And he has actually a deathly fear of the dark, which comes into play as well.
And there's not much dark in this movie.
There isn't. No, like I think maybe couple scenes with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they work together, and of course the fuse box blows. So that's because Jeff can't go down to the fuse box because it's dark. Mike has to do that, and that's where he finds these really important tapes, which is sort of the subplot of the movie, or almost a parallel plot in a way, right, Ash? There's kind of them working, and then there's the whole Mike listening to the sessions, to the tapes of this other patient.
Yeah, I mean they use audio really effectively in this.
They do.
So the audio. That whole, it's playing while the other scenes are happening. So I think they did a really good job in that. And that's the most scary part. It's very effective. Yeah.
It's so good. And so he finds these tapes and he's playing them. And so of course it starts with session 1 and then we make our way to session 9. So
I love the sessions of the therapist talking to the patient. Like those are so good. Yeah. It's just so you have to like think of everything in your head. You know what I mean? Like it's just the audio. So it's very creative, and like you have to visualize it yourself, but it's just such a really good way to induce psychological horror. I love it. So they did a really good job with that.
It is. Not a ton of movies do that. Of course there's some cliches in this movie, but I think they did such a good job with that as well. So this is where we meet our Mary Hobbs. So she was a former character, and we start with session 1 and we learn that she has
Mary.
multiple
I don't know.
personality
I feel like it was
disorder.
like Mary Hobbs.
Well, it's not just Mary, it's Mary. And then who do we have, Ash? We have 3 people. They're written on
This was
the...
very like, it was very shaky, you know?
Yeah,
It's like Billy.
she was a child when she was committed, right? I think 13 years old. And I don't know
if I'm
what
doing
exactly.
it right, but
yeah,
that's what it sounded like, kind of.
I don't know when exactly the tapes were done, but session 1 starts and you figure out that she has multiple personalities. One of them is the princess.
It was before Christmas Day, I'll tell you that.
That's right. It was before Christmas Day. I forget the year, but some time ago it happened, and she was committed to the Danvers State Asylum.
The 70s.
Yeah. So we learned that she has multiple personalities. There are 3 of them. One is Princess, one is Billy, and one is Simon. And so kind of throughout as we're making our way to the final tape to session 9, we hear about the princess, we hear about Billy, who aren't really evil forces. You know, they're more the positive forces. And we don't meet Simon until, I guess, the climax of the movie.
The end of the movie.
Yeah, the very end, the last scene of the movie, which is so
Act
great.
3. Really short Act 3.
So this breaks, so I guess we're now in Act 2. So we've got Mike listening to the tapes. We've got, Gordon and Phil working in the, trying to get this asbestos removal done. We've got Hank, who is a gambling addict.
Yeah,
and
keep mentioning that.
They do,
He's like a degenerate.
He's degenerate. Yeah.
He steals.
And it's Josh Lucas, guys. Like, I think the first time I saw this, I didn't know that. In 2001, though, maybe he wasn't as big of a deal. But it's Josh Lucas. He's got
Sweet Home Alabama, Josh Lucas.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what else is he in?
This is before Sweet Home Alabama, I think.
Yeah. Before Reese Witherspoon broke his heart, he was in. He was in session 9
as a gambling addict. That's all day
Stealing
1
from dead people.
Yeah, a lot happens day 1 though. So Hank, while he's there, finds this.
That's all day 1. That's day 1.
This is day 1. This is all day 1. A lot happens in the first 3 days. And again, remind you, it's 7 days. This whole movie is over 7 days.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
We're on day 1. Okay.
We're on day 1. Yeah. A lot to unpack here. So Hank discovers this almost treasure in the basement tunnels. And so he decides that he'll come back that night. Yeah. And so I love it. So you have the stuff during the day and then you have the stuff at night. And there's like this creepy stuff that happens at night. So Hank, they all leave for the day. Hank comes back at night. He goes to get his treasure. And he's piling it all in. He's all excited. He finds all these coins and he finds rings and he finds, what does he find, Ash? What else does he find in there?
I mean, he finds the lobotomy tool.
Yeah, he finds a lobotomy pick.
But you didn't say where the treasure was coming from. I mean, it's from the crematorium, right? So
is that where it's from?
Yes, these are all things from dead people. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, so he's like digging around out there.
Why is the lobotomy? Okay, I get it now. I get it.
So he's following. Yeah, you get it.
Yeah,
so he's following like the coin trail. He's like, and then he goes to the brick.
And I have a series on that.
There's like teeth and hair and all this stuff, and then the camera zooms back at the end, and it's the crematorium. So this is just all the stuff from the burned dead bodies.
Okay.
So I guess they left the lobotomy thing in the patient. I don't know.
In the patient. I mean, you're supposed to take it out. Pretty sure. Pretty sure that's supposed to go in and out and do its job, but controversially. So he finds that. He's all excited. But for Hank does not make it out. So on his way out, and they're so effective with the filming of it too, because they filmed it on him. And so the camera is the person and it's coming towards him. And you see him as he's leaving, he sees this like figure. And then he's like, hey, what are you doing here? And then just,
what are you doing here?
Yeah. What are you doing here? And then night's over. So, you don't quite know what happened to Hank, but cut to the next day. Hank doesn't show up to work. We're left with just the 4 of them: Gordon, Gordo, Phil, Mike, and Jeff. So it's just the 4 of them. Hank doesn't show up. They don't seem that surprised he doesn't show up because, again, he's kind of the degenerate gambler.
Yeah.
So Phil decides that he's going to call Hank's girlfriend, who just so happens to be Phil's ex-girlfriend. So Hank is sleeping with Phil's ex-girlfriend, Amy. Again, some of these subplots are interesting.
It was his wife. It was his ex-wife.
I thought it was his girlfriend. Wife? They were married? Damn.
I think so. All right.
That's cold. They're coworkers. They have to work together.
Very cold.
Every day. Well, so, Amy said that Hank had gone gambling, to gambling school. So again, they don't think much of it now.
Gambling
so
school.
That's what they said. It was gambling school down in Florida. Maybe a metaphor just for gambling.
Like a casino?
I guess, Ash, I don't know. So it's just the four of them now. And again, Mike's still listening to the tapes. Jeff is they're still trying to remove the asbestos. We learned that Gordo admits to Phil that he hasn't been living at home the last couple of days because he slapped his wife. So it turns out that night when he went home to see them, he came up behind her as she's at the stove cooking pasta. And he surprises her, and then some boiling hot water gets on him, and then he slaps the wife. And so we learn that he's now been staying at a hotel.
Right.
So, he's distraught. He's been calling home and, trying to apologize, but it sounds like
a brick cell phone.
Yeah, an old school, but that's what it was in 2001. We didn't have we didn't have iPhones. Okay. Pivotal final scenes. Let's jump to that. So Jeff is going cleaning, and what does he see? He's going up some stairs and he sees Hank. So Hank is not dead. This is the first time we see that. So he sees Hank staring at the window, and all
is he like naked? He's like naked.
He's not. No, he's not naked during that.
He's not.
He's naked later.
Okay. He's naked. Okay.
Yeah. He's naked later, but he's not naked during that part. He's got clothes on and
got it.
His sunglasses and the walk.
Oh yeah, the sunglasses.
Yeah, or Discman or whatever. And he just keeps saying, "What are you doing here?" And that's all he says.
What are you doing here?
So Jeff runs down. He's like, I saw Hank. And this creates this frenzy. So this is kind of the climax of the movie. And so, Phil goes looking for him. Jeff goes looking for him. Gordon goes looking for him. They're like, oh my God, Hank. Mike doesn't go looking for him. Mike goes back to the tapes. And this is when he starts session 9. So again, this is the end of the movie.
He didn't go. He needed to find out. Like he knew that.
He was almost at session 9, Ash. He needed to hear the end. Wouldn't you want to hear the end?
He knew the tapes were linked to their story somehow, and he runs back down.
I don't think he did. I think he was just curious about the ending. I don't think he knew that they were necessarily.
He's like, we have a break. Everyone's distracted. I'm gonna go listen.
Exactly. He goes down the tunnels. He puts that last tape in, which is session 9. So picture they're happening at the same time. So he's listening to session 9, which is where we learn about the third multiple personality, which is Simon, which is the bad one. So Simon turns out. He's the personality that made Mary, this Mary Hobbs character, patient, kill her family members. So she killed her little brother, and she killed her parents on Christmas.
On Christmas Day.
Yeah. So he's an evil force. So this audio is playing over this whole last scene. So Phil and Jeff go downstairs in the tunnels and they find Hank. And then it cuts to Gordon. He's making his way to the most dangerous ward. And again, it's kind of hard to explain. There's a lot of confusion happening, but eventually, Phil goes to find Gordon, says that they found Hank, and then it just cuts to the next day. And what do we realize the next day? The only one that's left there now is Gordon. And so he goes back in to work. It's Friday now. They've called in support. This other guy's showing up. But he goes in and he realizes, this whole time you're thinking that, something weird's going on, but you realize that it's actually Gordon who's doing it all. So I think Brad Anderson's really good with the surprise ending. So surprise, Gordon actually killed everybody. And not just all of his coworkers, but it's horrific. Gordon actually that night when he went home from the hospital to celebrate getting this account, he actually killed his wife, Wendy, his baby Emma, and his dog. So it's horrific.
I'm most upset about the dog.
Yeah, same. It's the dog. It's in the audio of it, Brad Anderson. I don't like hearing it. I feel like it didn't need to be done. But he basically...
You don't kill pets in movies. You just don't.
I mean, except that they do a lot in movies.
I know. Yeah,
but we need to talk about Pet Sematary, Ash.
I know.
Dead Baby. Session 9, Dead Baby, Ash.
You love bringing up Pet Sematary almost as much as I love bringing up Zodiac.
Yeah. So take a drink every time I mention Pet
Sematary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't like it. I don't like the dogs.
Yeah. So, you watch this whole movie thinking something else is going on, and then you get to the end and Gordo's the crazy one. And then at the end, it's like you see these scenes and it's like, do it, Gordo. And so basically he's been almost possessed in this hospital to kill all of his coworkers, and he had already killed his family. Yeah. So every time he's been talking on the phone, he hasn't actually been doing that. So that's basically it. So it's a very surprise ending, which is why we're like, watch it again, because there's a lot of hints and little things throughout that make you realize that he's not as normal or whatever as you think.
I mean, yeah, for the first scene, I was like, there's something wrong with, he's unraveling.
Something wrong with Gordon.
Gordo.
And then I think one of the best things about the ending, while this is happening, the session 9, the final session with Mary Hobbs is happening. And we hear this, Simon, the bad one, we hear that she killed her family, the very last line of the movie. And they're like, where do you live, Simon? And he's like, I live in the weak and wounded. So it's really, he's that bad multiple personality. And so there's those parallels there. And so it's, great. Brilliant screenplay. Love this movie. Again, I think a lot of people haven't seen it. At least
you can watch it like right now.
Watch it now, watch the whole thing, and then rewatch it. Apologies if there's spoilers if you hadn't seen it.
And then argue about the ending with your friends.
Yes. Yeah. We're going to get into that.
Yeah, we have different opinions on Phil and his role in the movie. Okay, that took a minute. We got there. There was a lot to unpack. Yeah. Thank you for going through that. And we know that Danvers was a real place. It got demolished, I think, like after the movie came out.
Yeah.
And now it's apartment buildings or something like that.
Yeah.
You can go rent an apartment and stay where they filmed Session 9. Did you know the other true story that it was based on?
No.
So Brad Anderson, he grew up in Massachusetts, and there was this really famous story about this man. He was, I think, 40 or something, and he killed his wife. And his name was Richard Rosenthal. So he was a character. I guess one night, he was cooking dinner, and his wife complained that he burned the pasta. It was like a baked ziti. And he freaked out and motioned her to the backyard and beat her to death with a rock. And if that's not bad enough, then he disemboweled her. Sorry, this is very graphic, but this is what happened.
This is horrific, Ash. What the hell did you find this in?
Yeah, well, this is what it was based on. This is what inspires Session 9. He disemboweled her. He took out her heart and her lungs and put them on a stake.
What year was this?
So this was the 90s. This happened in Massachusetts, in Framingham, Massachusetts. And he went to trial and pleaded insanity. Obviously, the lawyer was like, no sane person would do this. But I guess he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. So just a crazy, crazy story. And again, over this dinner thing, which was very similar to the screenplay for Session 9. She's like, it's burned.
Although it wasn't necessarily, Gordon was trying to be a little frisky. And she was like,
see?
Yeah, he goes in and he was being a little frisky because he was excited about.
Gordon.
Not now, Gordon. And then the audio of this again. Watch this. The audio. She's like, she has the hot pot, and then it just boiling hot water, and it just scalds him. But that's a little overreaction, Gordon.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay, now it's time for Screamometer. So, where do you rate this one? From 1 to 10. How do you rate this in terms of scare factor?
Yeah. In terms of scare factor, and I love this movie. I talk about it a lot. In terms of scare factor, I have to give this one a 5 out of 10. Yeah, great movie, great screenplay. Loved it so much. Brilliant ending, brilliant misdirection. Not super scary. So 5 out of 10 for me. I think of everything we've talked about so far, this is the least scary for me.
Yeah, I actually agree. We
the first time. Cheers.
Cheers to that. Cheers.
The first time we've agreed on.
I'm going to give it a 6.
A little bit higher than me.
It stays with you a little bit. Mm-hmm. It stays with you, and if you're in a dark hallway or something, it just kind of, and the hello Gordo and all that Gordon, it just kind of stays with you. So I thought it was
Gordo.
Do it, Gordo. It was very eerie, and I thought that raised my score a little bit.
Okay,
and I liked that it was kind of like an onion. It didn't give you a ton of backstory and context. You kind of had to they were
you did. Well, even afterwards, I think I'm learning things even through this podcast probably that I didn't know. I am.
Yeah. I think you missed some things.
I think I may have, and I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I think I did miss some things. But, that makes it a brilliant movie, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time you watch it, there's something new. Okay. So where did you see this movie? Do you remember?
Yes. August 2001. We watched it together in Montreal.
We did.
In the theater.
I don't remember
Did you not remember this?
No.
Yeah, we watched it together.
I don't know.
Yeah, August 2001, Ash, you and I were living in Montreal together, and we went to the theater and we saw it. So we were lucky, I guess. We were one of the 30 theaters that was playing it.
And they played in Montreal, Canada. Sweet.
Yeah. And we were so excited because we had seen the trailer. We were super into that. And obviously, everyone knows we love horror movies. But yeah, you and I saw this one together.
So why
This was
did I remember? I loved this movie, but I do not remember going to see it in the theater. Weird.
Yeah. It was great. And even better in the theater, I think, back then, especially the surprise ending piece. It was fantastic.
So good. So we are moving to cocktail number 2 pretty quickly.
Yes, it's
number
going
2
down easy. Going down easy. Simon's Revenge. Going down easy tonight.
I highly recommend Simon's Revenge.
Yeah.
The cocktail, not the actual revenge.
Not the split personality, evil identity, Ash?
Yeah, not that one. Cheers.
Cheers.
To an early sip number 2.
Yes.
Now it's time for Sip and Tell, where we discuss our personal experiences related to the content of Session 9. This was a tough one for me.
Same here, Ash. Same here.
Do you have any personal experiences? Do you want me to go first?
You go first. I've got one, maybe at the end. But okay, you go first. I really want to hear from you.
So I worked in a psychiatry department. And my office actually was right next door to what I thought actually was a counseling room. So I would hear a lot of rumbling and some disputes, family disputes and things like that.
Yeah.
And, that was every day. That was very constant. And so I went and asked some of the staff, I'm like, what actually goes on in that room? Because I have a shared wall with my office. And they said, what do you mean? That room's been empty and boarded up for 50 years. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, half of that is true.
Are you serious?
I mean, I wish that, I was like, what am I going to say for this one? I'm like, I wish that was true. No, I did hear some things though. There were a lot of things, working in a psychiatry department. So I did hear some things, but it was all very real.
I thought you kept going with that.
Do you have anything? Any personal experience?
Again, digging deep for this. Do I have any experience with state asylums? No. But one thing I will say, and it was a rather, big, I'm assuming advertising in the movie, but Jif peanut butter. Ash, do you remember when we were young? We couldn't get it in our hometown. So we were so excited about being able to go to because we lived in, again, New Brunswick, New Brunswick, Canada, and we moved down. We would, before we moved down.
They didn't have it? They didn't have it in Canada?
We couldn't get it. They did they did have it in Canada. Apparently it was discontinued the last 10 years. But we couldn't get it at our grocery store. And so we would get it when we would go down to Maine.
Yes.
So this is just, a Jif appreciation thing. Again, when I saw Jif on there, I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. Jif's like a peanut butter.
Are you going to like the ice cream?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like the ice cream and strangers, we're going to get into the Jif peanut butter. So
it's going to go really well with Simon's Revenge.
It's tasty. I think Jif's one of the best one out there.
I will often, if I'm hungry, just get a little scoop. Just get in there.
We didn't talk about what we're wearing today, Ash.
Oh,
why we're wearing white. So Ash and I, for those listening, are wearing white today. Mm-hmm. We wanted to do a themed outfit. They are in, hazmat.
This is really just for the YouTube watchers. But listening, you can imagine.
If I had a hazmat suit, I would have put that on. We could have put masks on, Ash.
Mm-hmm. You don't have most of the characters at home?
I don't have a hazmat suit lying around. Have I worn them in the day? I mean, I used to work in labs.
Buy, not rent. Worth
it. It depends how many of these we do. If we do a lot of these where they need them, you're right. That would have been worth it.
You should buy.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I will. I'll reconsider that. So if we're just wearing white as an homage to those white hazmat suits today.
Yeah, and they're, hanging in the hallway.
Yeah.
This is good. I'm not going to get too much of it. I'm really getting into it. Very creamy.
Yeah, and we're just digging in with spoons for listeners.
Just, getting in there.
We're not putting this on crackers. And I think that's how Gordo did it.
Peanut butter out of the jar.
Yeah, I think Gordo was just eating out of the jar. This was his sustenance for that week when, he was just going on a murdering rampage and we didn't even know it.
Yeah, he ate some peanut butter. Now, do you like the creamy or the
Oh, I thought even Ash. That's why I'm going to question. Obviously,
Crunchy. I'm like thinking, like,
who
what
likes
is it?
the crunchy? I'm sorry, no one likes crunchy.
I think some psychopaths like it.
Gordon, who was a psychopath, did not. He had the creamy.
He did. I
don't think Jif makes crunchy, do they?
I don't know.
We love
Listeners,
Jif.
tell us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do they? Do they make crunchy peanut butter? Who likes it? And what is wrong with you? I need to know. Like right now.
Yeah, come on. Let us know on social media. We need to know why.
You're like,
why you like the crunchy
so
peanut
crunchy.
butter.
Yeah. I mean, I get the texture thing, but like, no. Creamy is cake.
Yeah.
Okay, we are moving on to sips and scares, where we talk about our favorite scary parts of the movie. What's your number one? Because I have my, like, number one.
Yeah, I have two. Okay. All right. I have two, but my number one. My number one is when Hank goes back at night to get his treasure in the front of the crematorium.
His loot.
And his loot, his pirate's booty or whatever. And he's about to leave and he stands up and he sees this like figure in the distance.
Yeah.
And that was really creepy. You thought he was alone. You weren't expecting that.
Yeah.
I liked that a lot. Again, you've heard my rating. I don't think this movie's that scary, but I think that one probably out of everything, the top scare in the movie for me.
And I later when we talk about alternate endings, I'll tell you all about that scene. I have some inside info.
I love it.
I wasn't inside, but I have some information on that.
You've done a deep dive on the...
I have. I've done my research.
Okay.
Yes. For me, I think there were a lot of scares. I honestly loved the opening. The opening scene. The chair, the upside down chair. And it's like the singular piano notes, and they're very dissonant.
Yeah.
And then it's upside down and it flips around. The camera goes all the way
that's
around.
disorienting.
That's disorienting and like sets the tone of the movie. I thought that was very scary and very effective. And I think to follow that up when Gordo when they're doing the tour and when he sees the chair, that very chair in the distance, and it's almost like calling to him. It's very mesmerizing to him.
It's in Ward A. It's in the bad ward.
Yeah, the bad ward. And you hear, "Hello, Gordo," the one that I played. I'm not doing it justice, but it's so good. I thought that was also very scary. That's the first time you kind of see him start to lose it.
And you know that voice he hears at the beginning of the movie, and you don't realize it till the when Mike's listening to Session 9, but it's that same voice. It's Simon's voice. So the bad entity is the same thing. Yeah. So that's the thing that's like haunting Gordo at the beginning. And then at the very end, you realize that that's the same entity that was haunting the other patient, Mary Hobbs, and made her kill her family. So again, the parallels there.
I mean, I think it was obvious upon rewatch, I think. You're like, oh, that's... I actually thought it kind of sounded like the doctor. I'm like, oh, it's the doctor implanting memories, because I didn't really get the whole...
Interesting.
Yeah, because the whole story that Mike told about the young girl who said she was... basically said there was like some incestual cult-like thing happening with her family, and then it turned out it was her
satanic cult.
Satanic cult, yeah. It turned out it was her past memories. So when upon rewatch, I was like, oh, is it just like the doctor that's implanting these memories? And it kind of sounds like the doctor. And it turns out at the end that it was just Simon, in Mary's brain.
Yeah. And and I think we talked about this earlier, right? About the lobotomy, the oxyfam lobotomy pick. But I think Hank's death, or actually, even before Hank was dead, Gord or someone did, but you didn't even realize at the time, actually performed a lobotomy on Hank. But I think one of the interesting things when I was rewatching it, you actually learn when you rewatch it, and listeners, when you watch it, pay attention to this scene. It was one of the lunch scene, and Mike's describing basically how to do a lobotomy for whatever reason, how he knows. And he describes it with such sort of excruciating.
Well, he was very book smart, right?
Yeah, he was. He knew, but like a lawyer, but he knew like the medical part of it. He knew where to place it. He knew of that. And watch the scene and watch Gordon's face. Gordon is transfixed, and effectively in that scene, Mike teaches Gordon how to do a lobotomy. This happens, that's that first day. This is before Hank, reaches his demise through the lobotomy. And so effectively Mike teaches Gordon how to do it. So, Gordon picked that up quickly. He might describe it, and then he did it that night.
Like, where do I put it? Where do I put it?
Like, okay.
And then, I put the sunglasses on after because we're going to do a black eye. Yeah. I thought you had mentioned this in the synopsis, but where Josh Lucas is running down the hallway at night because he hears something when he's robbing the dead people in the crematorium.
and it's running down, and then he's like, what are you doing here? Right. And it just cuts to black. I love that.
Yeah.
That's
So
really scary.
good. So good.
Because clearly, I mean, they set that up. You're like, well, he knows the person. It's like, what are you doing here? Right.
But yeah, you knew it was someone, that he knew. And I think my perspective when I watched that, right, they kind of set up Phil to be the bad character in it. And you don't realize, till the end, it's Gordo.
Yeah. Phil was Gordo. Gordo was Phil. And then you and I think differ. Well, I think you and I have differing opinions on that. I'm interested to hear what others think. Oh, I also loved the part, like Jeff, like poor Jeff. He was like the fool, Gordon's nephew or whatever. And he's, that's established from like the very beginning that he's afraid of the dark. So when the power goes out and somehow he gets separated from everybody in the group, and he's now in this hallway with all the hazmat suits, and he's running like against the darkness.
Yes,
it's all going on.
He's like,
scene. He's just like
that was also on my list for best scare. I really enjoyed that scene, and he played it really well. He's like clearly hyperventilating. He's having a panic attack, and that was done really well.
Yeah, that was good. I like that one. Yeah. And then, poor guy goes out and just has some Oreos.
We could have got Oreos tonight, Ash.
We could have got Oreos. Yeah. He's like, sorry, like I saw them in the cab. And then, he's killed by Gordon. We don't know that until the end, but he killed his own nephew. This guy was just on a rampage.
Yeah, he was killing everyone. I mean, he didn't even, discriminate humans and like you said, animals, old, young. Gordon didn't care at all. He was just killing whatever got in his way, I guess.
So I have a question about the peanut. I'm bringing back the peanut butter.
Please. Yeah.
Hank goes down, he sees it when he's down there one of the times, and he's looking for the loot. He does. And it's like, it's empty, right? It's like an old, like Jif empty bottle. So because, we established that Gordon was living in a hotel. Was he actually living in the asylum and eating the peanut butter down there?
Obviously living in the asylum, eating the peanut butter, because you also see the flowers with the blood down there. Yeah. So after he killed, this is my perspective, he killed his wife, his baby, and his dog, and then he just went and stayed at the asylum. Yeah. So I think that's all the food he had, Ash. So I think, you can down a whole bottle of Jif peanut butter in one day,
So my other thought was it was either that or he was a previous patient there or something. And it was like an old bottle of Jif.
I don't think so.
Old.
No.
When did Jif come out?
I believe in the 50s, Ash. I think it was in the 50s. Yeah.
And maybe.
I don't know. I think it was on purpose. They showed the Jif bottle in his groceries.
Or maybe he's always
on purpose.
Maybe he's always Jif his whole life.
He lived at home. Well, I think he lived at home. He killed them.
Let us know what you think.
And then he didn't want to stay. Yeah, let's hear from you. I don't think he was. I think he didn't want to stay at home. Yeah, it was. Yeah,
it looked like.
And he ate that to the core.
And the other part, it wasn't necessarily scary, but I thought it was really pivotal to the movie, where Gordon's losing his mind, and he ends up at Mary Hobbs's grave, basically.
Oh,
and the graveyard, he's sitting on that stump, and there's clearly obviously they did that to show some parallel to him and Mary Hobbs, but again, was he drawn to that? How did he just make it over to her? Or was it Simon driving?
I think it's Simon. Yeah, I think by the time we get to the end, you realize that it's the hospital. It's an end. Well, maybe not though, because Simon was with Mary when she killed the parents. So maybe she brought Simon with her to the hospital, and now Simon's there and kind of possessing other people, the weak and wounded, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he was doing okay. He was very fragile. He was very weak and wounded, right? Gordon, he was had a new baby, but just not dealing well and needed money.
The new baby,
and when he arrived
with the babies, Ash. I'm telling you, this is a horror trope.
It's definitely a horror trope. But then when he arrived, Simon might have latched onto him. So that he was kind of, because he did look really out of it most of the movie. So he was
yeah, he did.
Kind of Simon was guiding him through the movie. I think the use of we already talked about this, but the use of the speech audio was very eerie, very scary.
It was.
Because it played over the other things, the other plot, the things that were happening in the movie. And it really kind of drove it. So, Mike, was he kind of useless? I don't know. He found the tapes, it's not one. He just so happened to find Mary Hobbs too. Such a matter, that's the one that was there.
I know. But maybe he was drawn to that. Again, maybe if Simon's kind of directing Gordon, Simon's also directing Mike.
Yeah.
Again, Mike kind of, he was the little instigator, wasn't he? He taught Gordon how to do a lobotomy. Yeah. He's the one that was sort of
putting the Mary Hobbs, Princess Billy Simon out into the ether. So
Yeah.
But Mike met his demise, at the end.
did.
They don't show Gordon killing him, but we see his dead body kind of propped up in that final scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, very Dexter.
Very Dexter. Yeah, it was reminiscent of Dexter.
Cellophane, or the tarp, the clear tarp. And I think the ending, right? The ending is very, everyone's dead. He killed everybody. Gordon killed everybody. And then he ends up in that room. And yet all of his pictures are now up on the wall. Pictures of his family. So I thought that was very, very interesting. So, okay, this is where you and I think, diverge. So from my perspective, watching the movie, and especially upon rewatch, Phil's kind of egging him on at the end. It's like, wake up, Gordon, wake up, but they're fun about the others. And then the new guy comes in and then Phil disappears. So from my perspective, Phil wasn't real. Phil wasn't real. He was just, and there's other parts of the movie where he's kind of like talking to Gordon from behind. It looks like he's like one of his personalities, like he's basically Simon, or just, something that he's imagining to deal with his trauma. Yeah. And I know you have a different opinion.
I don't think I think Phil is real. I think there's too many scenes where he's talking to other people and he's in his own truck. He had killed him. Gordon killed him, and then he was imagining. Gordon imagined a lot of things that happened.
But we never saw Phil's dead body at the end.
I think even the fact that we didn't see Phil's dead body, I don't think it means that he wasn't killed by him. Mm-hmm. I think that Phil died, Gordon killed Phil, and this was just like a figment of his imagination.
I think Phil
also
was
talking to Wendy during it when Wendy's dead. There's a lot of things that happen with people that had already died.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Phil gets really over the top. You know what I mean? He was almost like his alter ego, very competitive with him. But
he was his alter ego.
Yeah, that's why I thought he wasn't actually real. But at the end, when he's in the room, there are all the pictures with Phil in it. So I'm like, he's not there. This dude's just like schizophrenic and hallucinating.
He is real. Phil's a real person. He was that's what I'm saying. He was at the christening. He was there. It's just Gordon killed him. And then he's just imagining. I mean, the same thing. He imagines himself talking to Wendy on the phone. I think he's not okay. There's just too many scenes where Phil talks to other people.
Yeah, I know, but I think some things were not as they seemed. He was kind of like hallucinating some things. So I don't know. I think people need to weigh in.
Weigh in, listeners.
I wonder too, because of the asbestos, they were an asbestos abatement company. I'm like, was this all just because of asbestos? Like, were they just hallucinating because of the asbestos? So kind of like an unanswered question. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Phil just seemed like a really over the top character, to be real. I don't know.
But he was smoking a joint.
He was in it on a truck.
And he drove his own truck. I'm saying, why would he have his own truck?
But the next morning, the truck wasn't there. The next morning.
Because he was dead.
Yeah, but where did his truck go? Gordon took it?
Yeah, I think Gordon took that. Yeah, I think, Gordon probably took that and hid it. What did he do with Hank's truck?
Yeah, I don't know. We never saw Hank's truck. And I think, obviously, the real payoff for the movie, for me, was the ending, where they go through the different personalities. Like, where does the princess live? She lives in the tongue. Where does Billy live? He lives in the eyes, because I see everything. Where does Simon live? Right? I live among the weak and wounded. Right? So good. And I think at that point, they're showing the wheelchair as well. And the wheelchair was just kind of not even a metaphor, because it was a very physical representation of the weak. Right, the weak and the wounded.
Oh yeah, it was in Ward A, so it was definitely for our patient in the worst part of the hospital.
Yeah. But they were all weak. I think all of the crew was very weak and wounded in terms of they didn't reach their goals in life and things like that. So they all kind of were the same type of person. They just made different choices. Right, Gordon made a very, very different choice. So his ending was different.
I'll say, yeah.
And I read about this theory that he was. He was saving them from a life of blue collar work or something. I don't know if I agree with it at all, but
he killed his wife and kid and dog. I mean,
not the wife and kid.
The others.
He killed his coworkers.
But they had their exit plan.
They did,
according to Hank.
Yeah, but Gordon was their exit plan. He's like, I got your exit plan right here. He just cut them all. I don't know. Now we are moving on to cliches. Okay, so what were the horror movie cliches, or any movie cliche, that this movie really exhibited?
Yeah, for a horror movie, the fact that it was only, let's say, a non-cliche, it was all men, right? There were like no women in the screen.
I have that written down.
You do have that written down. I thought I thought that, so not a cliche.
They're heard.
Opposite of it.
They are heard, not seen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no, you see that one woman. And then you see obviously the woman on the tape. But the men that are in it clearly are cliches. Like we've talked about this. You kind of have the Joker one, you have the smart one, you have the lunatic. Apparently, based on what you believe, the alternate personality. But yeah, cliches. And then the other one that I had written down was Hank's big monologue with their exit plans, which wasn't necessarily a horror movie cliche, but like a movie cliche where you have this like monologue. Because it's like a 5-minute monologue where he's talking about their exit plans. It kind of comes from nowhere. It was sort of very out of place. Yeah. So I thought that was very cliche for just kind of a dramatic movie in general.
Yeah, I think for me, this is every horror movie does this. When they split up, it's like, I gotta find out, let's all split up. Split up. They're like, we're gonna cover more ground. They all split up. Like, you're gonna die. Like, that's it. You split up. You're gonna end up alone. You're gonna die by the entity or whatever. And they always do that. They always split up. And I would never do that. But no. Stay together.
Split up in like a mental hospital? Like, are you serious? That thing is huge. And there's all the different wards and everything. There's asbestos flying around. Yeah, I think that's not a smart thing. And then the other cliche I had was there's like always the smart friend, who like warns them or tells them. And Mike's not necessarily warning them, but again, like we talked about, Mike teaches the guy, Gordon, how to do a lobotomy, and he's the one that teaches them, about the history of Danvers State Hospital.
All right, let's move on to ripoffs. Okay, what did Session 9 rip off and what ripped off it? And there's a lot to talk about here.
I have a lot written down. I mean, number one, The Shining. I'm sure you have that written down. The whole thing where Gordon, if it's an entity,
that was one of his inspirations. That was one of his inspirations.
Yeah,
Brad Anderson, that. It was one of his favorite movies, and I mean, he is Jack Nicholson.
He is so crazy. Yeah,
and it only happens once he gets in. He's vulnerable.
Yeah. So the second he gets there, he's the weak and wounded, if you will, Ash. Yeah. And so the second he gets there, it starts affecting him. He kills his family, comes back in, he just kills everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a new rendition of The Shining.
Yeah, it was.
Just a lobotomy pick instead of an X.
Yeah, exactly. But but again, what ripped off that? Okay, but before we go to what ripped off Session 9, other things I think it ripped off, I want to talk about these. So the use of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 7. So the movie 7, right?
7.
So
I have 7. I love that. I thought it borrowed so much from 7, like where they're drinking the coffee in the car. Yeah. Although 7 was very rainy, right? This was very
Was that not with Phil, Ash? Was that not with Phil?
It was with Phil. But again, was he?
You don't think Phil's real? Phil was real. Come on, Phil was real. Phil was real. He died and then became like he was dreaming about him at the end.
Then why did we not see Phil's body?
So that 23 years later, when two sisters were doing a podcast, we would be able to argue about it.
Okay, we need to write the writer and be like, hey, can you
Brad Anderson and Stephen Gavita.
Yes.
Yeah, please let us know.
I do not think Phil was real. My sister does. Let's go.
To crowdsource this one, Ash.
Yeah.
We'll have to find that out. But yeah, so I think, so 7 was on my list with but also like the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean, that was a 7 thing where they did.
Oh yeah.
They showed that as well. And then the other big one, Sixth Sense. And I think he's inspired by M. Night Shyamalan with the surprise endings, the Sixth Sense, right? With the tapes. I love the tapes. Like, I think the tapes is so great. It's such an effective use of audio. Yeah. But I think that was inspired a lot or borrowed a lot from Sixth Sense when Bruce Willis's doctor characters listening to the old tapes and he hears things on them. I think that's very, very similar.
Yeah, definitely. And, the twist ending as well. It's really inspired by that. Yeah. So I have, one of the first things I noticed when they're pulling up to the asylum was the gate and they're pulling up and talking to the guard. That's very Halloween. Again, it wasn't raining. It was
were they going with like Michael Myers? Yeah.
And they kind of learn the history of the asylum, and they're like, oh, the patients, sometimes they come back, and they live here because they were forced out on the streets. Yeah. And again, I'm foreshadowing here. I will talk to you about alternate endings and how they kind of tried to bring that back, but it wasn't in the final cut. Obviously, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
obviously Jack Nicholson with
Stanley Kubrick too, right?
It's like yes, the lobotomy thing. So I mean, that's been
Shutter Island, Ash. Shutter Island.
Shutter Island.
Shutter Island basically copied this. But Shutter Island was like almost like a modern day version of this movie.
Yes.
You know, with Scorsese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although they made Leonardo DiCaprio sympathetic. Right.
They did. They did not really do that.
Well, he only killed the wife.
Because she killed big children. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Gordon just snapped because of hot water. I mean, it's a little different than killing your wife because she killed your children.
Yeah. I think the hot water was a metaphor. The hot water that he was in his life, right? Because he didn't want a child and all of that.
He didn't. Oh, they talked about that. He wasn't getting any sleep. And then, I mean, you should like kill the wife and kid for that. But yeah.
Was the father not getting, I guess he was working or whatever, but like he's not getting any sleep. Anyway. So the biggest one for me, what ripped off Session 9 was Identity. Right? And then John Cusack.
Yeah, but that,
We will get to that. We will get to.
I hear you, but that depends how you interpreted the movie because I don't think that's the case.
So when I thought Phil was just like one of his personalities or whatever. I'm like, oh, this is just Identity. Or like trying to figure out, because the whole thing was like, who done it? So they throw a lot of red herrings. And at one point, I think you think that everybody in the crew might be guilty of something.
Yeah.
Right? So Identity does that very effectively. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. This John Cusack is like so good. And it's basically a visual representation of someone that has dissociative identity disorder. And it's so good. And we will definitely do that at a later point in our podcast. And Identity was 2003, so 2 years after. So it definitely could have borrowed some from Session 9. So I have some other ones, but this is because of my interpretation of the movie. And I don't think you all have the same ones. But I have Fight Club. It ripped off Fight Club, right? Where Tyler Durden, he was like the same person.
Okay, spoiler alert. I've actually never seen Fight Club.
Oh my goodness. You've never seen
I know the ending, obviously, but I've actually never seen the whole movie, but fair enough. Yeah.
If you've never seen Fight Club, like, I'm so sorry. Spoiler alert.
Ash, every movie has done this. This is such a cliche, right? Yeah. Every movie's done the like fake friend or whatever.
They have, but this is like they were the same person. I guess, and the other one was A Beautiful Mind, but they came out the same year, 2001. So I thought,
got it.
And it all happened at the very end, right? Where they're like, oh, that person wasn't actually real. And you thought they were.
I think you're projecting some of those movies you saw onto this one because again.
All right, now it's time for alternate endings. And, we were really surprised on Instagram. We posted a poll and people seem really into alternate endings. So here you go for Session 9. Cheers.
And cheers to alternate endings. Very excited for this one. So obviously the one we saw in the theater, the one we saw in rewatch was, the whole thing was, Gordon killed everybody. And in the end, everyone just died.
Phil wasn't real. And, he disappears and you realize that Phil wasn't real.
Okay. But Phil is in the end as a part of Gordon's imagination. Whether or not you believe Phil is real, apparently is up for debate. But that's the ending we saw in the theater together, Ash, in Montreal in August 2001, and the ending we saw in rewatch. So were there alternate endings?
So I had to dig deep for this one because you can't find the actual video anywhere. But I did read about it, and there was a whole other alternate ending / subplot in the movie.
Oh.
Yeah, get ready for this one.
I'm excited for this one.
This explains some of the weird cuts in the final film. Yes.
Okay. Does it explain the fact that this debate over whether or not Phil was real?
No, it has nothing to do with Phil.
Okay.
Phil wasn't real.
Biggest question of the movie: Phil real? Phil
was not real. Phil wasn't real. Okay. So this alternate ending is and I think this makes sense because every plot point, everything that they say in the screenplay should have a point, right? So they talk about that at the beginning, saying that they shut down Danvers and all of the patients were forced out on the street. But he said some of them made their way back because it's where they felt familiar.
Yes, he said that.
Yeah, they were like living there as squatters, homeless squatters living in Danvers hotel. Sorry, living in Danvers.
It was not a hotel. It was a little different than a hotel. Yeah,
it was their home. No, so I guess one of the alternate endings or subplots was that there was this older woman who was living there up in one of the higher floors.
Okay,
and the idea was that she was like a former patient,
and she found herself Was it there. Mary Hobbs, Ash? It wasn't Mary Hobbs. No,
Okay.
it wasn't.
Okay.
No. Mary Hobbs was dead. You saw her grave, right? Where Gordo
That's true.
was there.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah, she's long gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, well, maybe that's a really good sequel.
My bad. Mary Hobbs is dead.
Yeah. Yeah, so this woman, she was like living upstairs, and I guess she was observing everything. She's watching Gordo and his crew come in. She's watching them do all their work, go about their business. You know, and so every time that the crew observes that menacing presence, right? So the time where Hank sees that figure, that's her. So that was the one where
Gordon. That wasn't Gordon.
well, that one where you actually saw the figure, because you could tell it was a woman.
That was my scary one.
It was an older woman. Yeah. That was like a cut left in from this other alternate ending, I guess, that was supposed to be.
Oh.
So she was this woman that was just kind of observing everything. But then she sees like the murders, I guess, and she becomes frightened. She kind of like, you know, goes into the background. But then at the very end, I guess the original ending was that when Gordo goes into that room and he's seeing all the pictures, she comes in with the pick, the phlebotomy pick, and she kills him for retribution, for revenge.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I
But I like that ending better. I like that better.
too.
Because
I think
Gordo
that's way
gets
better.
his comeuppance. You can't just kill all these people and nothing happened.
No, and I think that was, you know, a lot of those like American films. I'm like, you have to have some kind of like Jack Nicholson, The Shining, like he dies, he freezes to death. Right? You have to have.
He gets his
You can't just kill your family and your dog and let live
And just, like,
to
get
see
away with it.
tomorrow. No.
Yeah.
So I would have preferred the ending. I think they should release that where the older woman kills Gordo. She's the hero of the movie. So that is the alternate ending. Where I need to find this, like where is it?
I love that so much,
Yeah.
Ash. I think that's better. I do. I think that's brilliant.
I guess they didn't interview them. They were like, no, we don't want to talk about it because it wasn't in the final cut of the movie. They left it very like ambiguous, I guess. But like they just
Isn't there
let
a
Gordon
screenplay though?
get off with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get away with everything. So I want to know who this older woman was. And I think you have an idea there for a sequel that maybe it was Mary Hobbs. Maybe she wasn't actually dead. Okay, now we're moving on to the villain.
I love this one.
the villain?
I love this one.
I know. Who's the villain of this movie? You and I might have some different opinions.
Okay, but all right, the villain. I thought the villain, again, thinking outside the box, was Phil. He was the instigator. So, because he wanted basically Gordon's, listen, he
might
wanted
agree,
Gordon's
though.
job.
We might agree.
Oh, okay, but I don't think Phil died. I think Phil was a real person. He wanted Gordo's job. He was kind of instigating the whole situation. He told Mike and others about the fact that Gordo had confided him that he hit his wife. So I always thought Phil was the villain in this.
So I think ultimately the villain was Gordon, you know, through Simon, potentially, depending if you think it was paranormal or just like a psychiatric break.
Yeah. I guess I think, it's interesting to me. I guess I know there were the parallels between the two things, but I think it was just just that parallels. And Gordon was having a psychotic break, but he was the one performing all that. And I saw all the people as real people.
So, like, what do you think? So I talked about this, the asbestos. Was the asbestos the villain? Like, could it be? Could it be?
That would have been years long, right? So they were in the asbestos removal business. So 20 years ago, asbestos is a villain. That's what you're talking about. Not current Danvers State Hospital villain. I think 20 years ago, it's in their lungs, you know, it's producing.
I just think it can cause hallucinations. Like, was it the villain? You know what I mean? Like, it was causing them to hallucinate. Like, I don't know. Maybe.
All right.
Maybe.
It was asbestos from 1970 was the villain in this movie.
Potentially. It might have been. I don't know.
Maybe. You might be onto something there, Ash.
Was dissociative identity disorder the villain? Right. So, multiple personality disorder, that's been debunked, right? A lot of that was almost like implanted from psychiatrists and people that watched the movie Sybil, right? They thought that they had multiple personality.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was removed from the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, in like 1994. So it's not, multiple personality isn't a thing. And now it's dissociative identity disorder, but it's very controversial in the field. So the kind of the prevailing view is that it's not actually multiple personalities. It's a way for you to cope with your traumatic past. So you can kind of view your your history, your autobiographical memory through the eyes of others, right? So you can kind of like cope with it by compartmentalizing a little bit. And that's where
that's what Gordon was doing.
identities.
So
Yeah, essentially.
his wife and kid and dog, he now was viewing things through these like different identities.
Potentially, I mean, you could even see the whole movie as that. Like those were all different like parts of him.
Okay, I think before we leave the villain category, there's one last potential villain I want to talk about. So, from the very beginning, through Gordon's conversations with Phil, whether or not you believe Phil's a real person or not, he's having them with himself. He talks about how he's not sleeping. He says like the baby's crying a lot. So was the villain in this movie some sort of postpartum depression for him? And that caused him to kind of go down the spiral because, they really set that up at the beginning. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a potential villain in this.
Maybe, no, I think that's a really good point. Maybe insomnia as well.
Yeah,
have been a contributing
these things
factor.
that led to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He talks about he's tired. He talks about how it's difficult,
And you see that all the time with like women, where women experience postpartum depression and with their hormones and things, but it's less talked about with men, fathers. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So maybe just
what do people think?
There. Yeah, let us
That's
know.
a good one. Okay, we are moving on to our new segment called Sips and Simmering Questions. Well, we take questions from our listeners on Instagram, YouTube, Gmail, TikTok, whatever, and we talk about them in the episode. So we have a good one. We have a good one today. And it's coming to us from Instagram at Danes Taylor. Thank you for sending this question in.
Yeah, thank you.
And the question is how do you explain the phone call between David Caruso and Hank's girlfriend?
No, let me take this one.
Please, Allie, take it away.
I mean, how to explain the phone call? Because Phil is real. And so how to explain it?
This listener thinks he was not real.
Yeah. You explain it because, okay. All right. So just to give some backstory on this.
Send us up. Okay.
All right. So the day after Hank has disappeared, he obviously doesn't show up to work that day. And they're like, where is he? So they're like, we have to call his girlfriend, Amy, to find out. Also, Ash, Phil's a real person because Hank was dating Phil's ex. Like, what are you talking about? Like, Phil.
Well, that is my question. Was it Gordon's ex?
No, it wasn't Gordon's ex.
It could have been Gordon's ex.
It was a real person. Okay. All right. No. So the next day, all right. So he's like, how do we find this out? And they're like, we need to call Amy. And so Phil's like, I'll call her. Because he like has a relationship since it was his ex-girlfriend. So he calls Amy.
Gordon
so this to me, no, Phil calls Amy.
Well,
from Gordon's cell phone, to be fair. Phil calls Amy and he asks her.
From Gordon's broken cell phone.
Ash, Gordon's cell phone wasn't broken at that point. Gordon's cell phone was definitely working at that point.
The whole time.
Okay. So Phil calls Amy and he asks where Hank was. And Amy is like, she's not even that surprised. She's like, oh, he left last night saying he was going to gambling school or whatever. So basically, Hank had this
again with the gambling school. Like you go to a school,
but that's what it's
and you learn how to gamble.
Well, I think that was like a metaphor for a casino, Ash.
I think that's okay. Okay.
Basically, Hank comes home that night after work. He knew he had this like booty in the like his pirate's booty, like all this. It has some weird phrase for it, but he knew he had the rings and all the coins. If he goes home, he didn't like Amy anyway, he breaks up with her. He's like, I'm out. And then he's like, his exit plan was to go back to the hospital.
He broke up with Amy?
Yeah, and he's like, I'm out. So that's the last time she saw him before he went to the hospital. So then he goes back to the hospital, he gets all his coins. Then, Gordon lobotomizes him.
How much were the coins actually worth? It was just little coins, like 50
I feel like
cents.
we're talking like maybe $500, Ash.
Like $500. He's like, I'm going to Florida.
Like maybe. Like, and he just like blew up his life for that.
Yeah,
and he broke up with Amy and he was like, I'm out.
How broke was this dude?
But I think like for me, like that's the explanation. Phil was real. He actually called Amy. Hank broke up with her before he went back to Danvers State Hospital. And that's the explanation.
So my explanation is that Phil was not real. And that whole conversation, which is a figment of Gordon's imagination, because it's established at the end that the cell phone was broken and it never worked. So all of this, he's saying he has had conversations with his wife that he already killed before then. So we already knew that it was
broken. But we don't know that it didn't work. It got broken at some point during it. Ash, again,
we knew that his wife was dead. Right. So the whole time that he was talking to her, she wasn't alive. He's like, oh, like, please forgive me. He killed her long ago.
Oh, we knew he wasn't actually talking to her, but that doesn't mean the phone wasn't working. Like it showed him calling home and things on it. That there were just probably some cut scenes. Again, Phil was real. Amy was real. Amy dated Hank. That was all a real thing that was happening.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
Thank you, Danes Taylor. Great question.
Thank you, Danes Taylor. I hope we answered it. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of an unanswerable until we get the final answer, I think, from the screenwriters about was Phil real or not. Okay, we are moving on now to sips and sequels. So they haven't done a sequel. This was a one and done. What do you think about that?
I wish they'd done a sequel. I think they made it for like $1.5 million and it made like $1.6 million, so it didn't make a lot of money. But like we said, yeah, it didn't make like a lot of money, but they didn't release it really wide, and then it's had this kind of cult following. So I think it definitely could have a sequel again. We always talk about this, like prequels would be even more interesting, but I have a really good idea for a sequel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go. Tell me.
Yeah. So, and as we've been discussing it in the podcast, I think it hits home because, okay, the whole thing, right? This is premise that, and you find at the end that Gordon says that he killed his wife and kid and dog.
Yes.
But we've learned that Gordon's an unreliable narrator.
Yes, sir.
Right. And like you said, he's not actually calling home and he's kind of telling these stories. So we go through the whole movie. What if like, he made that all up? The wife and kid and dog are not actually dead. They're at home. So then they come looking for him so it's a direct sequel from like that last scene where he's in Ward A kind of talking on the phone, looking at the thing. And they come looking for him because they haven't seen him in days. And that's the sequel because everything's been made up. So he did, to be fair, maybe he did kill all of his coworkers, but he didn't actually kill the wife and baby and dog. And so they come looking for him. So I think that'd be a fantastic sequel that kind of plays into the fact that he was clearly had mental issues and was kind of making a lot of things up. And again, unreliable narrator.
That's really good. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, again, like it seemed like he was schizophrenic and suffering and hallucinating. So that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, and you're right. Maybe none of it's true.
Yeah.
So the writers did do an interview and talked about sequels. They wanted to do one, but they wanted to do a prequel.
Okay. Yeah, I love the idea of prequels. I think just to tell some of that backstory would be so great.
But they set it up for a prequel like perfectly. So it was going to be, listen to this, it was going to be called Session 1. And it was going to be about Mary Hobbs' story.
Love it.
Right? So it was going to be Session 1, and it was going to lead up to the end. The ending of it would have been Session 9, where she killed her whole family.
Yes.
It was going to be about her backstory.
Yes.
And I think the idea of it, and they talked about this, or alluded to this, I guess, at the beginning of this Session 9 movie, was going to be about her trauma. Right? So talking about kind of what led her to do what she did. And I think that makes sense because that whole story about the woman that was the patient in the hospital, she had that satanic cult, like what was the point of that?
Yeah, without having
point of that. Exactly. The whole point of that was like they have trauma and that's why they do the things that they do.
Yeah.
So I think that would make a lot of sense, but they never did it, right? It's been 24 years. They
just didn't make money. I think, it'd be great if they did it now. That'd be amazing.
We all want to see, I don't care if it makes money. Let's just go. We want to see it. We want to see Session 1. Let's go. Let's do this.
Let's do Session 1.
And do a sequel. Redo it. No, Session 9 was perfect. Please do not redo it, but do Session 1 and then do a sequel as well. Well, that's going to do it for Sips and Screams, episode 4, Session 9. Thank you so much for listening and sipping along with us, and we hope you join us next time as we sip more themed cocktails and discuss the bad, the good, and the truly terrifying of all of our favorite horror movies. Cheers.
Cheers.